Okay, let's just dive right into this. When you hear the word cloud, what do you actually picture? It's probably something weightless, right? Just invisible data floating around up there somewhere. But what if I told you the cloud is actually a massive, resource-hungry, physical beast? We're talking tons of concrete, steel, giant cooling towers, and literal rivers of water.
You hit the nail on the head. And honestly, that physical reality is sending absolute shockwaves through the world of infrastructure finance. Welcome to our explainer on the May 2026 Equator Principles Guidance for Data Center Projects. Today, we're unpacking the true environmental cost of our digital economy and how global banks are scrambling to measure it, manage it, and actually fund it responsibly.
Seriously, I want everyone watching to rethink the digital world for a minute. Is the cloud actually just a sprawling industrial complex? Because, let's be real, every single time you generate an image with AI, stream a 4K video, or run some complex search prompt, you aren't just sending a magical signal into the ether. You're pulling on real-world resources. You are literally spinning up heavy machinery in a massive facility somewhere on Earth.
Exactly. I mean, when you look at a modern facility, it's pretty clear this isn't some old-school factory. This is the physical reality of the modern cloud. It's a massive industrial ecosystem. And as a structured finance guy, I can tell you the rapid growth of these facilities is forcing a huge shift. The Equator principles, which act as the gold standard risk management framework for financial institutions, recently released their May 2026 guidance specifically because of this. Data centers are scaling up so incredibly fast, and their risk profiles are all over the map. The financial sector literally had to step in with specific rules of engagement.
So to regulate all of this, the Equator principles are forcing us to redefine the actual boundary of a data center. We have to look way beyond the building itself to what are called associated facilities.
So we're not just talking about the rooms full of servers here.
Right, exactly. The data center's direct footprint might actually be kind of modest, but to keep those servers alive, you need massive external life support systems. We're talking dedicated substations, miles of brand new transmission lines, heavy-duty water pipes for cooling, and huge fiber optic networks. If those external facilities wouldn't have been built without the data center, and the data center can't survive without them, boom, they are associated facilities, and all of their environmental impact goes right onto the data center's ledger.
Let's move to our next core concept and see how financiers actually measure the efficiency of all that cooling and power delivery. We use a metric called PUE, or Power Usage Effectiveness. Okay, as a climate tech guy, PUE has always sounded like total corporate jargon to me. What does that actually mean for the real-world footprint? Fair enough. It's simply a ratio. You take the total power entering the entire data center facility. So that includes all the intense air conditioning, the lighting, the whole shebang. And you compare it to the power that is strictly used by the IT equipment, like the servers. It tells banks exactly how much energy is just being wasted to keep the machines from melting down versus the energy used to actually process your data.
Which brings us right to Section 1, the Ramp-Up Challenge.
The Equator Principles framework is tackling a very sequenced problem here. Look, tech companies have incredibly rapid delivery timelines. They need these data centers operational yesterday. But expanding the public power grid to handle that massive new load, that takes years. So, to bridge the gap, developers are increasingly turning to customer-sided, behind-the-meter power generation. Basically, they are secretly installing temporary, localized power plants just to get the facility energized.
And this is what truly shocked me. The guidance explicitly notes that gas-fired generation is seen as well-suited to meeting near-term power needs. Natural gas turbines are acting as the secret temporary engine powering the modern digital economy behind the scenes. No way, right? We all think of tech as super clean and green, but in those crucial first few years before the grid catches up, the cloud is often running on fossil fuels just to get out the door.
Yeah, and that reliance on gas leads directly into the next massive headache for infrastructure finance. Section 2, the operational control paradox. It's this fundamental problem of figuring out who is actually responsible for all this energy use. A lot of data centers operate on what's called a core and shell model. The developer, the landlord, builds the physical building, gets the permits, and sets up the power and cooling infrastructure. But the tenant, usually some massive tech giant, actually brings in the servers, controls the IT load, and therefore drives the actual energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions.
Hold on, so the landlord owns the shell of the building, but the tenant entirely controls the dial on the emissions? That sounds like a complete regulatory nightmare.
Right, so how do we hold the right people accountable for emissions they don't even legally control? If a bank is financing the developer, how can the bank ensure the project meets strict environmental standards when the developer doesn't dictate how hard those servers are running inside their own building?
Well, the Equator principles answer this by forcing the issue contractually. The borrower, usually the developer getting the loan, has to establish robust governance mechanisms that reach across all the parties. Even if the landlord doesn't have direct operational control, they have to build strict environmental and social obligations into the lease agreements. They literally have to bind the tech giants and the contractors to these ESG commitments with performance guarantees, KPIs, and audit rights.
All right, so we understand the hidden infrastructure, the power grid delays, and the totally messy landlord-tenant dynamics. Let's move to Section 3, categorizing the risks, or the ABCs.
We start with Category A, which is the absolute highest risk. These are the hyperscale greenfields. Just imagine a massive, brand-new campus built on previously untouched land. Because of their sheer size, they require huge new associated facilities, like entirely new power stations and extensive water supply networks. They carry severe environmental and social risks, ranging from high water demand in water-stressed areas, all the way to the potential displacement of local communities.
To really put Category A into perspective, the guidance document outlines a staggering example project. We are talking about a 1 gigawatt campus with 10 buildings taking up 300,000 square meters. Because the renewable energy won't be ready until year 3, they literally have to build temporary gas power plants, a new 220 kilovolt substation, and 10 kilometers of overhead transmission lines just to get it started. The scale of the physical disruption is just mind-blowing.
It really is. Then we step down to Category B, the moderate risk level. These are typically your brownfield colocations. Here, we're looking at small to mid-scale facilities built on previously developed land. Think old industrial zones or retrofitted warehouses. The key difference here is they generally rely on existing off-site energy and water infrastructure, so they aren't forcing the construction of massive new substations or pipelines. The impacts are very site-specific and largely reversible.
And finally, we have Category C. These are the minimal risk projects. Think of city retrofits, just upgrading servers inside an existing building footprint. They plug directly into the current utility grid without causing any new stress on capacity, and they don't require a single inch of new land. From a financial and environmental risk perspective, these are highly manageable. So to summarize the dividing lines for infrastructure financiers, Category A triggers on massive land change and new associated facilities. Category B triggers on moderate impacts but utilizes the existing grid. And Category C sits safely inside an existing footprint with minimal grid pressure. This is essentially the cheat sheet banks use to sort the physical risks of the digital economy.
Moving on to Section 4, the future of tech finance.
The Equator principles lay out the gold standard for where the industry must go from here. First, it's just not enough to buy annual carbon offsets anymore. Best practice is now matching renewable electricity consumption on an hourly basis. Second, for that ramp-up challenge we talked about, developers need to ditch the quick-fix gas turbines and seek out sustainable alternatives, like gas-powered fuel cells or massive battery storage. And finally, linking efficiency metrics like PUE directly to strict international standards. The industry absolutely has to evolve past quick, dirty fixes.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly important question. When you combine the massive physical footprint, the intense ramp-up challenges, with those hidden gas turbines, and the incredibly complex web of operational control between landlords and tech giants, can the digital economy ever truly be green? Or will it always require this massive level of financial and regulatory gymnastics just to keep its impact in check? Definitely something to think about the next time you connect to the cloud. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we will see you next time.